Welcome back to the Real News Network. We are speaking with Ikram Ikti. He is an independent researcher and political analyst based in Berlin. He is co-editor of a new online magazine titled Rapture. You can find it at rapturemagazine.org. I thank you so much for joining us again, Ikram. All right, Ikram, when we parted from segment one, we were talking about the conditions under which people are going to the polls in Turkey, essentially under emergency rule, which is curtailing much of people's human rights, and they're going to the polls under a cloud of repression, one could call. Can you give us a sense of how the international community is responding to this repression in Turkey and the upcoming elections?
There are several different aspects of the responses of the international community to what's going on in Turkey. First of all, the most recent issue, the hottest topic in Turkey today is the looming economic crisis or a currency crisis today. I would like to emphasize one thing about how Turkey is pursued by international capital run by now. So since there is a currency crisis in Turkey, Erdogan is, of course, talking to investors again. The whole base of AKP government, the whole base of AKP rule in Turkey was based on the foreign direct investments for over a decade in Turkey. We're talking about more than $220 billion of investment, foreign direct investment in Turkey between 2002 and 2011. So with the cease of the influx of foreign direct investment and Turkey is being unable to respond to global financial trends at the moment, Turkish lira is declining in value. And Erdogan was in London last week, and he was holding meetings with investors, the representatives of financial markets in United Kingdom, and he was promising them that after the elections, he was going to take more control over the economy of the country, notably more control over the central bank. So this was completely undermining the autonomy of central bank in the eyes of the investors. So right after that, when you follow the large media outlets, economic reviews in Europe, like Bloomberg, notably, and Financial Times, you would see that there's a big confusion about Turkey and AKP rule amongst the capitalist class of Europe. So Erdogan is going to an election first time without the support of the international capital and with the suspicion of the international community.
All right. Now, for a very long time in Turkey, Ikram, the conversation about whether Turkey would be admitted to the European Union was a huge one. But of late, Erdogan has more or less abandoned that move or the desire, and has been a bit more confrontational with Europe. How is this playing out both economically and politically?
Well, economically, at least we can say for now that everything is normal. All the investments are in place. No European company is leaving Turkey because of Erdogan's stance against Europe. But politically speaking, it's rather more complicated because Erdogan also holds responsible the European states, especially Germany, in supporting the military coup, which happened in July 2016. And he's creating a discourse towards the domestic politics against Europe, that the European Union will never accept Turkey. And also the European Union or European countries, to be more specific, European countries, European forces are not happy with the growing prosperity and political stability in Turkey. So these are the arguments Erdogan is using in domestic policies, or domestic discourse. However, the economic relations I would say, haven't been undermined yet.
All right. Now, Erdogan has come under a lot of criticism by the European Union about the manner in which it is treating the people in Afrin. And of course, there are large numbers of swaths of people displaced in Afrin. Give us a sense of what that criticism is about and what is actually happening to the people there and what Erdogan's response has been.
Well, European Union criticizing Erdogan for what was going on in Afrin was, it's also interesting because Turkey didn't do anything in northern Syria by defying NATO or major players on the field. So Turkey's main argument, Erdogan's main argument while conducting the operation was the integrity and sovereignty of Turkey and protecting the borders. Europe criticizing Erdogan about Afrin sounds a little bit like hypocrisy because many European countries criticizing Turkey for this was part of NATO, who was overseeing and actually allowing and ratifying this operation.
So give us a sense of how this election that is underway or campaign that's underway is playing itself out in Europe. Now, as we know, there is a huge Turkish diaspora population in Europe. And Erdogan has in the past been criticized for holding political rallies in European states, in cities where there is a large Turkish population. And the Turks are being encouraged in those diaspora communities to actually come out and vote. And Erdogan somehow thinks that he's going to be garnering much of that vote. That is why he is out there campaigning. But this has also led to a great deal of criticism on the part of the European states. Tell us about why they're criticizing him for doing that and what are the advantages that Erdogan would have in trying to mobilize those communities to come out and vote for him?
Well, first of all, why there is criticism leveled at Erdogan for their European campaigns. This started before the referendum last year in April for changing the constitution. Erdogan wanted to organize meetings in European countries where there are large Turkish populations like Netherlands, Germany, and especially Austria. So he was declined when the official requests were made. Those requests were declined by those states. So the main argument was that this would be seen as an interference in the domestic policies of those given countries. And Erdogan capitalized it and also used it for his own sake, saying that the European, as you can see, the European states are against Turkey, not against Erdogan, in his discourses against Turkey, and this is because of This is because of growth of Turkey and prosperity of Turkey. So this is why they're not allowing, and Erdogan accused those states being anti-democratic and disrespectful towards the principle of freedom of speech. So Erdogan, of course, when we talk about Europe and the potential of vote in Europe for Turkish elections, we're talking about a large entity. There are millions of people of Turkish origin living in Europe, and this has always been a subject of political campaigns. So Erdogan is aware of this force, and Erdogan, whenever he goes out of Turkey, when he holds a rally in a European country, he is always speaking towards the identities of these people, towards the pains and sufferings of these people, and capitalize it for his own sake, like giving them an image of a leader, first time in their history.
All right, Ikram, there's so much more to discuss. We should also talk about Turkey and its membership in NATO. We should also be talking about U.S.-Turkey relations, but I'm afraid we're going to have to save that for another conversation. So I thank you so much for joining us and hope you can join us for those segments in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.